I just thought, Richard, you might want to tell people why we played that particular snippet.
You tell him, you're right there.
Because the gentleman who's about to come out actually played the bass on that song. It was not Jamerson, and he told us not to play it because Jamerson didn't play on it. But the fella is here, so we played it for him. So
He is, and I'll tell you, this guy he's a musical icon himself. He's played on over 200 top 40 hits. It's 200 top 40 hits. You're supposed yeah. What a privilege it is to introduce the legendary Bob Babbitt.
I was going to write something out, and God, I started to write a book. So much about James. His creative contribution to the things that he played on his bass inspired so many, not only bass players, but all musicians. It was playing some of the most classic, incredible classic bass parts that were ever recorded. I mean, that's it. There's no denying that. It's there. Just listen to one of the songs he played on, and I mean, sometimes I listen and I say, you got to be kidding. You know, he played with one finger, which we know as the hook, and how he made it around with that one finger, I'll never know for the stuff that he played. I know he played with a relaxed and light touch and played some of the most complex and intricate bass lines ever played on record, ever recorded. He, for 50 years now, his bass playing is still heard around the world. They say to Motown, there's a Motown record, a song played every minute around the clock, whether it's on radio or films, TV shows, commercials. I mean, for all those years, the younger generation of musicians, not only bass players now, I'm talking about all musicians, have been inspired and influenced by him. His bass was so in tune, and his bass playing was so tuned in to the song he was playing. His freedom of expression. To him, the most important thing was the feel, whether he was playing 2 notes or 22 notes. And his bass, it sang out to the people. And you know, if you listen to the records, now, the other day I was driving my car and I can't remember the song, but the bass is as high or higher than the vocals. That's saying something, really. You know, he had his use of open strings, the flat 5, the chromatics, opened the door for the bass that we were so always used to hearing boom, 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 but not with James. And one of the best parts about that is the songs that he played on were exposed to Middle America, and it spread all over the world. And I call that education, you know, and musicians who would listen to his bass parts and attempt to play them, it would be like getting educated at a college comparable to Juilliard. That's just unreal stuff. He sometimes, his bass sounded like a train coming down a railroad track with driven by him. And you could feel the thumping in your heart. It just made you want to get up and dance. And if you were driving and you heard him driving, you better pull off the side of the road before you get in a wreck. Telling you. There was, we have a lot of different genres of music. Latin, jazz, R&B, soul, rock and roll, country, swing. But together with James, the Motown musicians that he played with, and their knowledge of music, their discipline when they played on the records, their creative and innovative input was so original that now Motown is another genre of music. You can listen to radio, especially like satellite radio, and they say, okay, today we're going to play soul, R&B, and Motown. I mean, and you know, there was a lot of people that said James was Motown. Yes, definitely. You know, they had very few tracks to work with when they first started. I think there was something like 3 tracks at Motown. And you couldn't overdub. You had to play perfect from beginning to end. I think of some of his bass parts. And you know, and even when they went like to 8 and 16, what they used to do is if somebody made an obvious mistake, they would just stop and you start over again. Well, I guess when they did have 8 and 16, they didn't realize they could stop. So they just kept playing straight through. And think about those bass parts, really. Woo. No overdubs, no Pro Tools. Yeah. I was real fortunate to actually do a couple sessions, some sessions with James, and I watched him on sessions, and we did some with 2 basses. Sometimes, I remember one session we did where we were running the tune down, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to play, and that was usually the normal way. The 2 bassists would talk, and maybe one guy would go up here, one guy go down here, play octave figures, whatever. But there was a couple producers we worked for that would walk over to us, and they would come over to me and say, whisper in my ear, you get what he misses. Then he'd go over to James and say, you get what he misses. Hey, that's well and fine, but the only problem for me was James never missed anything. Woo. Yeah. And then there was a Motown, Norman Whitfield session, and we were recording a really funky track. Now I had this custom-made leather hat, and I called it Old Funk. And anytime I was on a session where we were cutting something funky, I would wear that hat, because believe me, it would take me to another place. So as we were cutting this track, I reached in my gig bag, I pulled the hat out, and I said, James, here, wear this. Oh my God. Oh, we went in, or we listened to the playback after that, and I'm telling you what, you could smell the funk coming out of the speakers. I'm serious. And James always had a favorite quote, and this is the first time I heard it. He said, welcome to the valley of the funk. Oh, shit. James was a bass player. You know, some people say he was a tormented genius. I knew he was frustrated because he was pouring his heart and soul out. And there was no credits on the records at that time, no recognition. We didn't have Bass Player magazine. And naturally, like they got now, God, they got internet, they got YouTube, they got MySpace, they websites. I mean, there was nothing like that at that time. And I guess it got to him a little bit. I know that no one was even interviewing him. The only interview I know about is when he relocated to Los Angeles, and one interview that I know that actually made it to print, I think that was in Billboard magazine. When Motown did their 25th anniversary, they didn't even ask him to play on it. So he went to the theater, and he went to the backstage area. All he wanted to do was get in, see the show, and maybe talk to some of his artist friends that he had played on records for. They wouldn't let him in. I mean, I never understood it, but he scalped a ticket and he went up into the seat in the balcony. And God knows what went through his mind. Shortly after that, James passed away. I'm sorry. I just never could understand it. I'm sorry. When James played, he heard things nobody else heard. He saw things in the music no one else saw. He went places, different directions that no one else went. He felt things no one else felt. And through the years, there have been many bass players who they came close to emulating his sound, and they came close, some of them even to emulating his feel. But none of them could emulate his heart and soul. James was his own spirit. Oh, God. I think, though, his spirit is alive and well today, and you could hear in the playing of the other bass players. And I think his legacy will, because of his contribution to the music world and to the people of the world, I think his legacy will be with us and be here through eternity. That's saying something unbelievable. Now, you know, James has received a lot of awards. He was the first, not only the first musician, but the first bass player, or I should say not only the first bass player, but the first musician who, when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame started a sideman category, he was the first one that was nominated to that. He has served awards were served to him for, he has a plaque on the Rock Walk of Fame. He's been inducted into the Musicians Hall of Fame. There's a association in Canada called the Black Blues American Society of Canada, where they categorized him as a master of celestial music. There was a book out on him that featured bass players from all over the world who paid homage to him and played a tune or several tunes that he had played on. And I'm sure I'm missing stuff, and the list is growing every day. But one thing that I don't know if you're aware of, he is, now we're 50 years later, okay? 50 years later, he is today the #1 rated electric bass player in the world. What can you say to that? Unbelievable. I guess the younger generation would say, what do they say? That's rad? That's cool, man? Well, I got 3 words to say, man. That's fucking awesome! Yeah. Now I want to introduce you guys a lovely woman, and please welcome her. It's James' wife, Annie Jamerson. Come on. And her daughter, Penny.
James Jamerson was the granddaddy of all the modern day rhythm and blues and pop and whatever you want to call the music that we're listening to now, bass players. You know, he innovated bass playing for this genre of music.
I remember being grabbed by songs like My Girl and Shotgun and Heard It Through the Grapevine, all these fantastic songs, and subconsciously always noticing the bass.
It's not so much that we're paying attention to the bass specifically as much as the groove was just so funky and it just felt so good that you just couldn't stop but shake.
There weren't a lot of credentials on things. It wasn't until later that kind of his name surfaced, and then you start going through things and finding what he played on, and you go, well, let's see, I guess that guy played on everything I've ever liked in my life.
You know, Motown didn't credit the musicians, so by the time I realized it was Jamerson, man, I had to do so much backtracking to say, and that was him too.
Well, there's something about the James Jamerson attitude to playing bass. It's melodic, it has this round, super round tone, and it moves the song. If you listen to those old mixes, the bass is right up front.
The way those Motown records were mixed, and I think they were mixed around Jamerson, but Jamerson got his own track, which was unusual because of the recording process. It was 4 tracks at most, and he was the guy that got his own track.
The bass, of course, carries the bottom tones of the recordings and he just had another way of playing and another way of carrying the rhythm section. He was just so dominant while being subtle.
Melodic lines with a twist of rhythmic pattern, an open string. All his lines were memorable melodies.
His sound and the Fender bass together was just pretty magical, and it was full, it was rich in the bottom end, it was married to the bass drum really well and didn't get in the way of what was happening in the middle.
I just love this textural quality that he wove, where most guys would have just been dun, dun, dun. He's down, you know, he was throwing things in that were just really surprising.
You can really strip away every single other element, the guitars and the keyboards and the drums, and you can still hear that song. You can hear the essence of that song. And I feel like his parts would be that way if you could go back to those Motown tapes and strip everything out except the bass and the vocal. You would still have 95% of the same emotional reaction you would have to the whole thing.
His body of work and his sound is the soundtrack that we all grew up to, and it's with a Fender Precision bass and the songs and the tracks that he laid on his Fender bass. It's the ultimate machine, music machine. He turned it into a voice, into something with soul, feeling.
He was so unique, and he played in a way that was so unbelievably original that he just started a whole new trend. And most of the young guys who are playing now, or the guys who've been around since he was around, have in some form or fashion mimicked him in their playing.
Every bass player since James Jamerson has been influenced by him, whether they knew it or not. And so James Jamerson and his bass presence is just, it's part of our fabric, it's part of our culture. I mean, it's like woven in there for the bass players and for the non-bass players, for the fans alike.
And people who don't know about music, they might have a hard time picking out the bass line to a James Jamerson song because it's moving around, it was kind of low and muted, but for people who know, it's very revolutionary.
He wrote the book, and I think any guy who aspires to be a bass player should just not try to copy him, not do any of that, just try to absorb what it is this guy was all about.
What I used to tell students a lot is that we all stand on the shoulders of people so that we can see further. We're all standing on James's shoulders.
The mighty shoulders of Jamerson that all modern electric basses stand on.
Thanks, man. I love your playing. I love your concept, and God, I wish I looked that good in a skinny tie, but my beard gets in the way.
I'm really thrilled that Fender has included James Jamerson and inducting him in their Hall of Fame, because his stamp on Motown music and his contributions as a bass player are undeniable, and it's great that more people are learning more about those great songs that he played on from that period.
Well, I'd like to add to that, he was just melodic and funky. That's what I received as I was standing here. It's such a beautiful moment, and I thank all of you, especially Fender, Leo Fender, and the family, the personal family, as well as the corporate family, and for honoring my husband this way, and all of you guys are sounding me real good too. So we're just so honored. My son James Jr., he's a bass player in his own right as well, and Joey, and we lost a son, Derek, 3 years ago. That was super talented, but I'm sure he's here in spirit tonight. And my daughter Doreen Penny Jamerson is behind me here. So once again, I thank God for blessing Mr. Leo Fender with the gift of putting together an instrument that would later on in life that my husband would pick up and propel it into greatness, I should say. Music being heard around the world, as Bob said. Still 50 years later, they're finger popping, and sometimes you sit back and you think, say, Lord, that was so many years ago, but it's just as popular today as it was then, even more popular in one sense, except for the energy back in the 60s was, the Temptations could come out with something, or one of the other guys, one of the groups could come out with something, and it was all in the streets of Detroit. The radios were pumped up. So I'm thinking, and first of all, let me stop and congratulate Mr. Yamamoto. Congratulations on your induction. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I'd like to, on behalf of my family and all of that, just thanking that God bless James with the gift of music and the feel and touch. And sometimes I'm listening to that music, and I say the other night I heard something on the radio, and I said, my God, honey, you were right. I mean, he's gone, but I said, it was so melodic, and it was just like a concerto all in itself, you know. And I think everyone has said everything that need to be said about my husband musically, but it's just so wonderful, and we're so proud to, I'm so proud to have him as my husband, and that you're honoring us, and the children feel the same way, I'm sure. And, you know, what do you say after all that's been said, except thank you, and God bless you. And one of the things that it's been said, but not put in perhaps these words, and James did change the face of music. And so often we hear it sort of watered down about the Motown sound, but he and Benny Benjamin were the Motown sound. Barry will state that for the most part, and all the other funks were just as great. At the beginning, you know, it was a starting point. And along with Fender and Jamerson, I tell you that they made a great marriage, didn't they? So I'd like to think that James and Derek are looking down on us this evening and smiling. And, you know, one of the things is that you can create a lot of things in life, and so often in later years you don't feel that you were appreciated. And it brings back to mind, as I was sitting in the hotel room this afternoon, I was thinking about the time that he was playing some music, and when I walked into the room, he sort of lamented. You might have read that story in the Standing in the Shadows of Motown book. But he was sort of wringing his hand, and then he wiped the tears from his eyes and said, I got teary this evening too, this afternoon, that I did it. I did as if he was trying to convince himself that I hear all of that and I did that. People told him that he was ahead of his time so many times. He'd say, baby, they say I'm ahead of my time. He didn't really know what he was doing that time. He was just trying to make some money to feed his family, you know, and creating along the way. And so I thought about him this afternoon, I should say, and with his wringing of a hand and the tears that he was wiping away from his face, I can look now and say to him, as I hope God is allowing him to look down, that yes, you did, honey. Yes, you did. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Fender for having the opportunity and to have this event. It's a special time because August 2nd, 1983, my father passed away. And for his legacy to continue on, because he didn't know how special he was at that time. And when, thank you, Bob Babbitt, for, you know, coming up to talk about my dad. It's so special to take the time and have people to just put this together. It takes a lot of energy, time, and money. So I want to thank everyone. This plat over here, my God, this is just awesome. I can't read because I don't have my glasses on. But this is awesome. It is so awesome and so special. So I truly, truly want to thank Fender and Mr. Yamano for donating or being the businessman that he is to keep this going. So that way my dad can receive this Hall of Fame, or the family as well. So, and the band, you guys sound great. I appreciate you. And every time when I go out to different clubs or different concerts, I always stop and shake the hand of the bass player. So I would like to shake your hand. I don't know your answer. And one thing for sure, if you don't know how to play the bass, take the time and feel the funk. If you don't feel it, my dad would say, put it down. Thank you.
Everyone, God bless you.
How extraordinary was that? like a nice little history lesson. We've got a great treat for you this afternoon. There's a Marvin Gaye song. It's called What's Going On, and James Jamerson played bass. But today, I think Bob Babbitt has agreed to play bass. Bob?
That was for Jamerson. I love you, James.
Real quick, let me introduce the band while you're on your feet. First of all, Bob Babbitt on bass. When it wasn't Bob, it was our own Don Wick right here. The horn section today, Denny Montz, Ted Belladin, the beautiful Tommy Holloway, Dennis Rowland, this guy I stood next to on stage for about 10 years, Mr. Chris Goff, our own Shane Nicholas, John Becker on percussions, D-Dog Butler drums, Brad Townsend on Hammond organ. Give him some love. They can't do this at Motorola. You know what I'm talking about? They cannot do this. Are we going to play some more? What are we going to... You want... No. Are you getting paid?
Pick up the guitar.
Yeah. You dropped the F-bomb before me. Oh, it's an E-flat minor, scat. Now you're playing my song. Ja put no potato on my plate. I'm humbled. For some closing comments, how awesome was this, first of all? Be honest if your eyes were welling up while Bob spoke. Come on. Yeah. All right, let's get Bill out here for some closing comments. Everyone that puts this thing together, how awesome. You know who you are. Thank you so much. Mr. Mandello?
Before we wrap up, I'd just like to say thank you to so many people who put this event on. There's really a lot of work that goes into this. Especially like to thank the two Jasons. You want to come out, just take a bow quick? Certainly without them, we wouldn't have been able to put this event on. It was a great event, great day. We're celebrating Leo Fender's 100th birthday, and I'm sure if he was here today, he'd be very, very proud of what we've done. I know Bill Schultz, if he was here, he'd be very proud. It's a great day for Fender. I know I'm very humble when I see these things to be a small part of this great company and this great legacy. And I think everybody here should be very, very proud to be part of this great legacy that we have. It's a great company, unlike any others. And I think we talked this morning about continuing the legacy and continuing to make history. And I think Leo and Bill, we are continuing on. And I think the company is greater than ever. And I think we're going to have new heights. And there's hopefully a few Hall of Famers out there right today. And I think, that we're going to be a much better company because of these kinds of things that we do and the legacy. And we all know what's going on. So again, thanks a lot for everybody coming. Thanks a lot for everybody putting on. Again, thanks for the band. So with that, thank you.